tonight is away. I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight. Glad to see so many people showed up for this meeting. We're going to have a short business meeting, and I'm going to call on our secretary to speak up. Vital change.
Good evening, everyone. Glad to see we had such a nice turnout. We've got a couple of just housekeeping matters. I'm going to have to ask for Edith Carrington. She's around. She's got to give a nominating committee report. Is Edith in the kit? Oh, there she is. I'm going to have you give your report, and then we can make the motions, Edith, for the election.
Can everybody hear me? For officers, we're recommending Tyler Downs, Hy Carrington, Bob Brinton, and Ed Sapiga. And for directors, for 3 years, Bill Brinton, Ed Sapiga, and Isabel Anderson.
Excuse me for a minute. I'm always carrying so many papers, and I think I forgot the one that I needed back here.
Now I'm not going to feel so bad when I forget everything.
I'm always forgetting over here. We should get paid by the pound with all the paperwork we've got to carry. I've got a couple of motions that I'd like to put forward to the general membership, and I'd like someone to, I would entertain a motion after I read it from the floor. The first motion is to amend Article 4, Section F of the bylaws in order to stagger the terms of the 2 additional directors which were elected at the February 1994 meeting, so that 3 of the 9 directors will be elected in a given year. And I will entertain a motion to that effect from the floor. Hello. Seconded? Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion carries. The second motion that I will entertain is the motion to accept the nominating committee report that the directors for 3-year terms beginning in October of 1994, I believe they were Edith Carrington, myself, Edward Sapiga, I'm sorry, it was Edith, myself, Will Brinton. I'll entertain a motion to that effect. Seconded? Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. The third motion I'd like to present, or I'll entertain, is the motion to accept the nominating committee report that the officers, as reported by Edith Carrington, President Tyler Downs, Vice President Hy Carrington, Secretary Ed Sapiga, and Treasurer Bob Brinton Jr. And I'll entertain a motion to that effect. Seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. I entertain another motion to amend Article 4, Section G of the bylaws so that 5 directors will now constitute a quorum at our meetings. And I'll entertain a motion to that effect. Seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. And the last one, I hope I'm not boring everyone before Les can get up here. To amend Article 4, Section E of the bylaws to delete the requirement of dual check signatures and replace it with the requirement that the treasurer receive approval from the board of directors before issuing any check exceeding $200. And I'll entertain a motion to that effect. So moved by someone? So moved. Seconded? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Thank you all for your consideration.
I'd like to introduce our fundraising chairman, Craig Stone.
I'll try to be brief. The Historical Society is in the process of applying for a grant from the state of Connecticut. Most of you probably received a flyer like this in the mail. I know all the members were mailed one. It lists all of the items that need to be taken care of at the Stanley Downs Memorial Building or the old Bethany Town Hall. The total estimate that we have for all of these repairs totals up to about $150,000. The preliminary discussions with the bonding commission indicated that without some pledges and cash and in-kind contributions, that our application would not be received under the best terms. They asked us to see what we could do to raise money, hopefully as much as a third of the funds required before the bonding commission meets in December. That made us aware that we only had about 45 days to get a fundraising appeal going to the general public, as well as the members of the organization. We are asking for pledges, cash contributions, or in-kind contributions that could require some building or some of the items to be taken care of on an individual basis. We have already raised about $4,500, which is about 1/10 of what we are looking to raise between now and the 1st of December. We have some of these flyers out on the table outside. We are able to take collections this evening. Is that right, Bob? Any donations will be gratefully accepted. If anyone has any questions regarding the fundraising, or if you think that you can offer some in-kind contributions or wish to make pledges, please see me after the meeting or Bob Rick. Thank you very much. Table at the rear. Oh, I'm sorry. It'll be in the back. I'll move the forms to the back. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce Les Warner for his speech.
Throw down your buckets. Man the hose lines. More water, more water. If you love me, boys, give me more water. These were the calls and the cries in the grand old days of firefighting 100 years ago. The magnificent white fire steeds would clatter down cobblestone streets, 3 abreast, pulling their great flaming cauldrons of steam, black smoke belching, and the brightly shirted firemen, sometimes in nightshirts, would pull their jumper carts over streets and curbs and who knows what else. The evolution, urged on, of course, by the foreman with his speaking trumpet, and when they got to the fire, they would fight with each other for the right to put out the fire, sometimes while the building burned down. The evolution of firefighting has come down to us over the centuries. The 2nd century, the Romans, the Greeks, they were well versed in firefighting techniques, pumps, inventions and science which were lost to us after that for many, many centuries. The bucket brigades of the 14th and 15th and 16th centuries were relatively ineffectual. However, the towns turned into cities and the fires turned into conflagrations. The great London fire of 1666 burned for 4 days. It leveled 2/3 of the city. It burned down 13,000 houses and 90 churches. In our own country, the Great Fire of 1835 in New York, the St. Louis waterfront fire in 1859, the Great Milwaukee Fire of 1892 only served to show us how important the evolution of firefighting and newer engines were important. It is generally conceded that Germany produced the finest of fire engines, although most of our early fire engines came from England, the Hodge, the Merriweather, and operated by such notable people as George Washington, who was a member of the Friendship Company in Alexandria, Virginia, and Benjamin Franklin, who was the chief of the Union Company in Philadelphia. Well, the Bethany Fire Department doesn't go back quite that far. And neither do I. Although some of the newer members in the department seem to think that I do. They ask me questions like, what was it like before fire was invented? I tell them the truth, it was cold. I've been in the fire service for approximately 40 years. I've only been in the Bethany department for 26. I joined the Hamden Volunteers Company 8 on my 18th birthday in 1953. I've seen many changes: apparatus, gear, equipment, and probably most important, training. We've quite literally gone from being cellar savers to a very efficient, well-trained fire organization. However, with change comes goods and bads. Much of the old romance is gone from firefighting. However, it is more than compensated for by the great improvements in the saving of life and property. Today is Friday, October 21st, 1994. It is almost exactly 60 years since the formal organization of the Bethany Fire Department. Just how far have we come? We've gone from the cotton and the denim and the leather, past the era of the hip boots and the rubber raincoats, to very efficient and safe fighting gear. The leather boots have given way to steel-reinforced hard rubber boots, approximately $100 a pair. The newer fire-resistant and heat-resistant gloves have replaced the old leather gauntlets. The cotton shirts, as handsome and dashing as they were, didn't really offer much protection. And what we have now is the Nomex lined and insulated bunker pants and jacket. The leather helmets have gone the way of history, and now we use the unbreakable ABS plastic with face shield and Nomex hood. The total protective gear that Rick is wearing goes for about $900. Because of the increase in hazardous materials, we are more and more required to wear air packs, compressed air, SCBAs, approximately $1,500. The fire officer's radio for fireground communications, the old trumpet has gone, rounds the whole package up to about $3,000. Firefighting has gotten very expensive. Thank you, Rick. Rick is third generation. My father belonged to Company 8 in Hamden, as I did. Moved over to Bethany in '66, and Rick is third generation, and I'm quite proud of that. I'd also like to take a few minutes and point out some of the things that are up here on the display tables. If you haven't had a chance to, I don't think I need this. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, please do. The scrapbooks kept by the Howard family show a wonderful history, a panorama of Bethany and the fire service. Some of the old books show the old apparatus. Please look at it. A few years ago, you may have seen this in the register, we were able to acquire an old fire bucket at an auction in Wallingford. The name on it is Horsefall number 2. Checking on an old map, we found that the Horsefall family lived down here at the corner of Falls and Amity. We can only assume that they were required to have 2 buckets. The number of buckets that a family was required to have varied from town to town and with the house and with the business. Generally, it was 1 or 2 buckets per house or per hearth. So while a house was required to have perhaps 1 or 2, a bakery or a brewery would have to have 4 or 6. Communications has developed from the speaking trumpet to a disc system which went into effect in 1939. I have an old newspaper article, I believe it's from the Register, which says that the air whistle disc alarm system is going into effect very shortly, and it's dated August 1939, so we did use this on the old original firehouse. The way it worked was this. The officer on duty at the state police barracks would cause 3 blasts of a whistle, which was mounted on top of the firehouse, to sound, and then follow it up with telephone calls to truck drivers. The first person at the firehouse would take one of these discs, depending on the number code of the location of the fire in town. For instance, 132 might be on Bethmore Road, while 246 might be up on Beacon Road. And everybody had a code, they would know exactly where the fire was. It was operated by a large air tank, which was located in the basement of the firehouse, and which I understand no one ever really wanted to sit that close to. In the 50s and 60s, our Plectron system came out. This is the old Plectron Chief. I know some of the old firemen sitting in the audience remember these. This was supplemented by the Ladies Auxiliary telephone tree, and I remember many times Jeannie Jackson calling me up and saying, "Get out." Most of the time I would have already been gone. This sort of caused the disc system to phase out and gradually taken over by more and more efficient plectrons, until now what we carry are the tiny little belt pagers, and that's what you see all the firemen carrying. Okay, more scrapbooks, more displays. These are some of the trophies that we won at the Engine 260 muster, and you're going to see more of this in the slides. Okay, I think I said enough. Frank, would you get the lights for us, please? Ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you the history of the Bethany Volunteer Fire Department. Like their Woodbridge neighbors to the south, the people of Bethany used to depend on the Bucket Brigade for fire protection, as the many fine old cellar holes in town will testify. Bethany finally decided to organize a company whose purpose was declared to protect life and property. Largely through the efforts of the Bethany Grange, an organizational meeting was held in the Old Town Hall on September 24, 1934, with Wallace Saxton, the first selectman, presiding. The first order of business was to elect a temporary chief, Wallace Saxton, and a temporary secretary, Irving Clark. We, the undersigned, do hereby agree to form a volunteer fire company in the town of Bethany. Louis Dion, William Edmondson, Nelson Peck, Edward Sherbert, John Harrison, one of the first officers, Otto Reel, Edward Holloway, Ray Short, the first captain, Stanley Downs, first officer, Irving Clark, Jerome Downs Jr., O.D. Crooker, who was the first chief, Lawrence Peck, William Asbeck, Charles Booth, the first sergeant at arms, J.H. Swander, Wallace Saxton, James Harrison, Walter Hayes, the first secretary, J. Irving Johnson, and John Edmondson. A resolution was then prepared to be presented at the October town meeting. It read, "Be it resolved that we, the people of the town of Bethany, recognize the newly organized Bethany Volunteer Fire Department, and that we donate to said department the schoolhouse known as Center School, situated on Amity Road, to be used by them as a headquarters and firehouse." Center School was under the jurisdiction of the school board, and because it was a complicated process to transfer ownership of the building, the use of Center School did not come to the fire department until December 1934. The first meeting to be held in the new firehouse was on March 5th, 1935. Some modifications had been made on the schoolhouse. Doors replaced a wall, and the floor had been reinforced to withstand the weight of the Ford truck, which was ready for its first test with Woodbridge's hose in April. Meetings were held downstairs in the basement. This montage of pictures shows Ed Hinman, Ellie Downs, Henry LaCroix, and Harry Johnson doing various revisions to the original Center School. On December 18, 1934, the department purchased a 1935 Ford V8 half-ton cabin chassis, the foundation of the number 1 truck. Largely through the efforts of Chief O.D. Crooker and the Waterbury Iron Works, this finished truck was produced. It had, according to Red, 2 inline 75-gallon per minute pumps, producing 150 gallons per minute. I want to just point out one little point of reference in this picture, and that is the big tree right behind this piece. If you remember, up until just a few years ago, there was a big tree right in front of the center station. That's the same tree. Throughout all of these slides, you will see that tree. The first Fireman's Dance was held on December 14, 1934. The department raised $106.40, increasing their treasury to $109. On July 28, 1942, the department purchased its second truck, a 1924 Seagrave pumper. The truck had originally been used by the manufacturer as a demonstrator and was bought from the Orange Fire Department, where it served for 8 years. This is a photo of the 35 Ford in the foreground and the 25 Seagrave in the background. Any idea where this location is, Red?
It was up by Tutlin's place, off of Tutlin's Court there.
Okay. While pumping out a fire early in 1950, it suffered a cracked block and was retired. Go ahead, Red.
This picture was taken at Beck Pond, and the Ford, the 35 Ford, and the 24 Seagrave there. That was after that same fire. And on the left there is A.R. Johnson. His son is here in the audience. And Doug Seaton was the one to his left. That him was behind him, but you can't see him.
We also have Jeannie Johnson Jackson in the audience. I'm not sure if Bobby Clark is here. Those are the only two sons and daughters of the original members that I know of. Feel free to speak up out there if you have something to add. I'm sure there are people out there who know more about this than I do. In this picture, left to right, Nelson Peck, Ed Hinman, Ellie Downs, Ray Short, Ken Becker, Henry LaCroix, Lawrence Peck, Stan Krupian, and Doug Seaton, and Ted Burley. I guess those are some names that you haven't heard in a while.
The total capacity of these two trucks, the Seagrave was 350 gallons a minute, and the Ford was 150, so that gave us a grand total of whatever.
500.
Well, the fundraising went on, and this is a shot of preparing for a dance. Throughout this presentation, you will see various slides of fundraising, and at the end of this presentation, you'll have a chance to participate in fundraising. In the lower left is Doc Britton, Gil Whitlock in the middle, George Jackson, upper left Bob Weinshank, middle a very young John Herb, and I think Wally Gunderson on the right. Tell us about the Christmas trees, George.
Well, this is Red. I was involved. That was George's brother's truck.
Oh,
And we used to go to Vermont and so forth to pick up Christmas trees and bring them down and we sell them at the firehouse. So some of the trees were an absolute disaster. Between Gus Atone and myself and a few others, drill holes and put branches in.
you haven't changed a bit, Red.
One day we got a call from a customer and the branch that we stuck in turned upside down.
Another of the fundraisers was of course the carnival, and I'm sure many of you remember the old bonfires. If you look closely during this sequence, you will see how to build a bonfire. And then of course it all fell down and they had to rebuild it with boxes. And the ad in the Amity Star advertising. Time out.
The box was normally donated by Acme Wire through Red Johnson.
Yeah.
That's what we used to put together.
Speaking of the Amity Star, I wanted to list some credits. Much of this information that I'm reading here, I will stop reading in a while, but it's very valuable and I want to make sure that it's factual. Much of it came from the Amity Star issues of approximately 1951. Also, Bethany Yesterday, The One-Room Schools by Hazel Hoppe. Bethany in 1982, Sesquicentennial Committee 1982, and Bethany's Old Houses and Community Buildings by Alice Bunton. I also want to express appreciation while I'm at it. I should be a lawyer with all the papers that I'm spreading all over. I want to express appreciation to Red, first and foremost. When I was talking about the historical artifacts up here at the table, I should have mentioned Red. Red joined the fire department in 1942, and that figures to me to be about 52 years of service, and that's not too shabby. I want to thank Red for the many slides which he supplied to me. Also, slides and information from George Jackson, Sally Hinman, the Howard family, the Hoppe family, the Brinton kids, Will and Bob Sr., Barry Collins and the Register, Thelma Lumpkin and the local papers, and the Amity Star, of course. I should say that while a lot of this program is humorous, I don't mean in any way to make light of fire service. It's a very serious business, so please don't think that. Where are we? We're at the bonfire. To replace the Seagrave, the department bought a new Ford heavy-duty truck chassis, built it into an efficient firefighting machine, most of the work having been done by the members of the department. This 50 Ford was obtained for $1,500 from Marker Motors, which was their cost obtained for the department largely through the efforts of Mac Bissell, who is out here in the audience this evening. Mac, we need a tune-up on that truck. Is the warranty still in effect?
What the hell are you growling about? I told you for the last 6 months, the warranty's for another 50 years.
Still runs great.
I think we're going to have it for another 50 years too. Okay, Red, you're on.
This truck was designed primarily by Ed Hinton, and we went down to local cellar door in West Haven. Clyde Hicks at the time was foreman down there, and on a Saturday we had about 7 or 8 guys here, and we bent up all the sheet metal, and then we brought the stuff home, and over a period of time we put it together. And when we got through with it, the total cost on the thing was $4,500. Match that today. It's a 500-gallon midship pump on there. It was surplus.
And correct me if I'm wrong, carried 325 gallons of water.
Yeah, tank on it was 325.
With the new piece number 3 came new helmets.
I'd like to say, Sally Hinman took this picture, whether she remembers it or not. When the helmets came in, that was primarily our turnout gear, whatever you were wearing. Of course, Ed Hinman was the chief, I was the assistant chief,
The testing of number 3 progressed. This is Peck Pond. You can see some changes have been made in Peck Pond over the years. And that truck really drew some water. I'm impressed.
It had to go through an NFPA test, and it passed the test with flying colors, which was a trigger for us.
This next slide shows that this number 3 was not all that was tested that day. I call this next slide Delusions of Grandeur.
Get 'em right.
You have to remember, on this, I was 42 years younger than I am now.
Some additional testing, or perhaps this was a fire. I think this was out on Cheshire Road. This was also number 3. One of the reasons I wanted to put this slide in is that I see this second gentleman from the left is wearing one of the old civil defense helmets. And during the war, the firemen doubled as civil defense assistants. And the saying was, in case of an emergency, lie on the floor and do what the nice fireman tells you to do.
Just for the record, the fellow on the left with the red hat is Frank Murray.
Okay?
Wally Gunners is there, Henry LaCroix on the back step of the truck. And the other two, I can't place right now. And it's not a good picture.
And Ed is the second from the right.
Might be Lawrence Peck on the right. I always carried a camera, and still do today.
In 1957, number 4 was purchased, which, if you remember, has been recently totally refurbished, is used as a parade piece, but at the time, it was the state-of-the-art truck. And so, number 2 having been retired, we then had the 35, the 50, and the 57. Also in 1957 came Operation Piggyback. Go ahead, Rick.
On this, it was a civil defense drill, and we took our Mac down to the New Haven station, and we placed it on flatbeds. Now, we were accompanied by probably 50 or 60 fire trucks from all the towns in the area, and we went over to the sub-base in Groton, and as our Mac sitting there, I climbed up on a hill to take the picture. I couldn't do it today. And this is a curtain of water we put up in the background of the submarines. So we had quite a day. I'm sure Gilbert Whitlock was there, weren't you, Gil?
Yeah.
And we had quite a time, I'll tell you.
In 1964, we purchased the 64 International. Carried 1,000 gallons of water. And this is testing over at Peck Pond.
No, it was over by
Holy Road.
the lake over there, Howard.
Oh, yeah, I knew it was. I got my terminology mixed up. Clark Johnson on the left.
Right.
I don't know who it is, second left.
He wouldn't face around.
And Ed and Ellie.
My camera was fouling up at the time.
At this point, I kind of consider that the end of the early years, and I'd like to do some talking about the parades and musters that the department got into about that time.
Les,
Yes.
can I ask you a question? If you could tell the people where that fire truck is now, that International?
Yes, it was donated to a town in Maine last year through the efforts of Dave Spencer, who lives in that town. Okay. Okay, this section I call Parades and Pride.
This parade was in London about 1951, I believe. And Ed Hinman led it off. On the right there, Kenny Becker. And, well, further back, I know Frank Murray is there, and Gilbert Whitlock. And we have quite a contingent.
This is
Weekend.
Jackson up in here.
Frank Jackson, right?
Yeah.
A.R. Johnson,
Gil, are you in here?
Yeah.
Which one?
second from the front there. Yeah.
Okay, I thought that was you.
This parade was down from Seven Rocks. Of course, George Fields on the left, A.R. Johnson on the right. Who's behind A.R., I can't tell. But Ed Hinman was on the left there in back.
This is Bethany Parade. The closest that I can date it is right around 1958. Shows on 3 vehicles.
We equipped the 35 Ford with a 500-gallon front mount pump. We did away with a huge 275-gallon pump. Worked fine. Take a look at the cars in the background.
The Women's Auxiliary of the Bethany Volunteer Fire Department started on March 16, 1953, while Ed Hinman was chief. The following women were the founding members of the auxiliary: Ruth Atwood, Amy Austin, Ruby Beckert, Mary Clark, Dorothy Cunningham, Sally Hinman, Olive Howard, Virginia Jackson, Alice LaCroix, Kayla Tonin, Clara McDonald, Marion Sandell, Betty Turpin, and Gert Wooding. One of the first duties of this organization at the time was to call each individual fireman in the event of a fire. They also served coffee to firemen during fires and raised money to buy items the firemen needed. The organization disbanded in 1966 due to the lack of member participation. In 1972, they reorganized with Fay Hickey as president at the request of the Firemen's Association. I was directly involved with that. I was secretary at the time in 1972, and I said, hey, how come we don't have a ladies' auxiliary? So I didn't get a satisfactory answer, so I wrote a letter to Fay, and that was when the ladies' auxiliary was reorganized, and they have done some fine things since then. The quilts, which you must know about every year, the fine fundraising activities which they go through, and the great support that they give us. This is the church area, and if anybody recognizes anybody there, please.
George Hale's holding the banner. And I think Kenny Becker's leading it off. Ed Hinman, I see him on the left there, second back. That was one of our parade pieces. That was a 29 Lincoln that I did up. And we won the first trophy in the fire department with that car. That was a talking about. And there it is that we had it in the St. Patty's Day parade down in New Haven. And it had a big bell on the front of it, sirens and red lights. And Harry Austin and myself painted the tires green. Henry LaCroix had a Cushman motor scooter, and we had a rope going from the scooter to the front of the Lincoln, supposedly pulling it through the parade. At the end of the parade, we parked the thing in front of a gin mill on South Street, and Henry came up the street on a motor scooter and made a right turn into the gin mill and skidded up to the bar. It wasn't
Well, no, I'd like to look at the two before this, if possible, but we can skip it if we have to. Oh, yeah, that's the next one. This is called Parading is Tough, but Somebody's Got to Do It.
Right. This was a parade up in Newington. George Jackson's uncle was involved in the town here, and we took the Lincoln, went up there,
And that's your long-lost cousin, right, George?
somehow or other we got involved with Miss Newington.
This is one of the newer, more recent parades when we went from the white shirts to the blue shirts. I recognize, of course, Ed, but there's Jeannie's brother Beach right here. There's one right up here. And I really don't know who else is back there. The reason that I wanted to show this particular slide is that it's probably the only picture I know of that shows the old Caddy ambulance. We started off with a Packard. Tell us about the Packard, Red.
The Packard was bought from the Oxford Fire Department. We paid, if I remember rightly, $350 for it. We made a down payment on $175. Then we got the rest of the money, and we got a thing in the street down the side. It had a nice little dent in it. So I took it to Rick Cunningham's Moonlight Body Shop, firehouse, repainted it, straightened it out. And the thing that yeoman service, when it used to quit, it would quit when you have patients in there. We don't need one night going to the Waterbury Hospital with a woman that supposedly had a broken leg. And you had to make a U-turn on the hill, and a standard transmission, you got to go, and we went up to the hospital. But everything was hairy. So finally we got it out of that Cadillac.
Right around 1971, we were called out on an ambulance call, and 3 or 4 of us were down there in the South Bay trying to get that caddy started. We had to jump it, which was pretty much standard procedure, and I think Al Spencer was there, and probably Johnny Richardson, and probably Bob Hickey. And I got a little bent out of shape, and I said, how can we operate like this? So at the very next business meeting, I brought it up and said, we got to do something about this. George Jackson, as assistant chief, was presiding, and he set up a committee right then and there, and we went out and bought the 71 International Ambulance, and that was the start of our modern ambulance corps. Contributing highly to our ambulance corps was Dick Lyon. This is a very, very bad slide, and I apologize for it, but it's the only picture I have of Dick, and he's getting an award in the South Bay during the middle 70s. Also in the picture is Miami Harry Johnson on the right, George Quinn, and John Weston, all very, very active in the ambulance corps. I also want to show this picture, which shows 3 generations of Howards. This was at our annual meeting when Herb got the Fireman of the Decade award, and I thought it was worthy of note. Back to fundraisers, and this was in the days when we did the lobster dinners, and there's Paul Weston on the left and Ray Lazard on the right, the chefs. We had a lot of fun doing those. Back to the parades. As the parades increased, the trophies grew and grew and grew. And some of these are on the table over here, as I mentioned before. This is a register photo taken by Barry when we acquired the leather bucket. We naturally tried to get our most handsome fireman to pose with the bucket. What happened? But we failed.
You got the oldest.
Back about this time, Gil Whitlock and the Whitlock family donated a hand-drawn piece, which you may have seen in some of our parades. Largely through the efforts of Jim Melbourne, we acquired that. We thank you very much for that, Gil. That piece, I've done some research on it, and we've traced it back to about circa 1850. And we have put it into several parades. This was the New Haven parade, I think around 1980. And on the lower left, you see old Alonzo Warner. And then there's Ebenezer Hurlburt. And then on the middle and far right are the Merrick boys, Step and Fetchit. And second from the right is old Zeke Grand Prix, son of Rudy Grand Prix in the upper left. That's where the Sainer guys are standing. Myself, Bobby McSherry, and Doug Brown. We've had a lot of fun with that parade piece. And as you see, not all of the firemen's bright shirts pulling hand-drawns were uniform shirts. Some of them were night shirts. Another parade is the 1982 Naugatuck Convention Parade. We see several Westons. We see several Sheelers. And I'm sure you recognize some other faces in there. We have since then established the practice of taking a formal group picture. And this is last Memorial Day. I find too often that a lot of these records slip through the cracks, and it's very, very important to take these pictures and keep these records. And I'm very, very happy that the Historical Society came into existence and is encouraging all of this among our organizations. Actually, that's a picture of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir with the band leader, Reverend Steppinger, there in the lower left. Okay, let's talk about musters for a little bit. Some of the musters are very old, some of the musters are new. Every year we go to the Engine 260 muster down in Milford, and that is where these three trophies over on the table came from this last year. On the left you see the Bucket Brigade ladder going up, and on the right, a continuation on the upper right part of the arena pumping. One of the old muster teams consisted of lower left, Ellie Downs, Charles, I guess it is, Balmer, Dick Lyon, upper left, John Herb, Fritz Johnson, Dick Price, and Bob Weinschenk. And of course, you old number 3 there.
Yeah.
A somewhat later muster team, lower left, Dick Lyon, Neil Hansen, Buster Johnson, upper left, Bob Hines, Mike Hubick, Bob Hickey, and Bob Weinschenk. This is an action photo of one of our teams in the arena pumping. Let me take about 30 seconds and tell you about arena pumping. The men start on a line. They have to run up, put on all their gear. They run another 50 feet. They have to jump onto the truck. The truck takes off, drives 100 yards, comes to a stop next to a water tank, which you see there on the left. You have to pull the suction hose off, hook it to the truck, pull a prime, pull 200-yard hoses off the back of the truck, run it down 100 yards, and knock 2 candles off a pole which is 50 feet away. Our teams do it in just a little over 1 minute. This is an action photo. And this is Gary McCrum as the driver, jumping out of the truck and about to prime the pump. Ken Ives and Brian Howard are pulling the suction hose off. Chip Norton is about to assist them. Doug Riley and Dave Kittel are practically horizontal right here, taking off with the hose, and Doug Grom is jumping on the far side. You see his foot about to hit the ground. One of our more recent muster teams is shown here. I'm sure you recognize the faces. Now that these faces have broken the camera, we're going on to another section which I call Fires and Firehouses. No slideshow of the history of a fire department would be complete without some fires. If some of the fires are disturbing, I apologize for that, but the fire department is not all parades and cake sales. It is also death and destruction, and that too is part of the fire history. It was very common in the old days to see Ed Hinman get out there and burn off the airfield. We don't see it anymore. When the old number 1 was recycled, the body was taken off it and mounted on a 51 Chevy, which was used as a brush truck. It was very common in the 60s and 70s to visit the smokehouse in New Haven and the fire grounds in Derby and participate in drills and training, including oil fires, etc. Red?
This is a barn that we had to set on fire. In those days we could do it. Today it's a hassle to do it. And these are kind of stark when you look at them, but they were set. You have another slide, I believe. That's what was looking involved. That was over Route 69 just north of Hatfield Hill.
Hold on, Red.
So it was just on Route 69, just north of Hatfield Hill Road, if I remember right.
The barn studio is in the background. It appears to me that the firemen are prudently moving the hoses a little back a little.
This was a drill we had. We used to get cars from Seymour Auto Wrecking and bring them up to the athletic field, and we go to work on them. And probably burnt that car 2 or 3 times before we finally destroyed it. This was a fire at Nels Peck's on the corner of, it's near the corner of Peck and Fairwood. And part of the house went. And in the picture, on the background is Ed Hinman. And then the next one is Bob Jones, who used to run the airport. And then His Honor Cunningham was the fifth one. Yeah, we were going to make coffee.
No criticism, but if you look at the fire gear that was used in the old days as opposed to what you saw Rick wear tonight, you can see that we've made some drastic changes.
This was a house on Route 42. Johnson is the owner. Thornton Johnson, I guess it was. Marguerite Henry and Duran lived there. And this was not the fire. This is the aftermath. Later on, we burnt the house. But her aunt weighed about police went by with his station wagon, and he pulled her out of the house and set her on the tailgate of the car. So it was almost a death in that fire. This fire was at Holloway's house up in the corner of Munson and Amity. It was a drill. We used anything we could for a drill.
It's possible that's me on the nozzle, because I remember when we did this drill, and Russ LaCroix there in the white coat was right behind me instructing. And he said, in order to put out that fire, you have to get that nozzle inside the house. And he pushed my hands and the nozzle through the window, and I was not wearing gloves and I burned my hands. Never again did I go to a fire without a pair of gloves. I learned something that day.
We burned a house one time over, it was Fian's house over Fairwood Road. And the orders were from the DEP to remove the shingles off the roof because our asphalt, they would add to the pollution. So I'm not going to mention any names, but some of the firemen, they took the shingles off the roof and they threw them in the cellar. It didn't make much sense.
This will probably bring back some memories. It could have been the days when the fundraisers included the fly-in breakfasts. This, of course, is the airport diner, with what we know now as Town and Country behind it. Well, the airport diner was a drill too.
The airport diner was stucco on the outside, and we had a heck of a job getting it going. Yeah. But there's a picture of Ed Hinman, and we used, I don't know how much gasoline to get the thing going. Of course, it was a damp day, too, I don't know.
Another house fire on Route 42.
I took the picture, but I don't remember when.
As far as the firehouses go, the first firehouse, Center School, had become inadequate. There were 2 trucks housed in a space designed for one. The meeting room downstairs couldn't hold all the members. In the early 1950s, plans were made to build a new firehouse. The department raised a large part of the money through carnivals and selling fireworks, and the town voted to lend the balance needed. The basement of the original firehouse was incorporated into the new building, and I was down in that old basement a few weeks ago, and there's some initials way over in the corner. One set of initials is EH, and the other initial is JE.
And let me tell a little incident there. We had a fire down the Fenwick's greenhouse one time. It was in the wintertime, and we still had the skid chains in the truck. So I happened to be working on the fire truck when the call came in. So I took the 35 Ford, went out, peeled off that left door. I looked back at the door hanging at an angle. I said, "Oh, brother." And then I broke 9 cross chains going down to Fenwick's. So the following Tuesday night, I was on the carpet.
Amity Star, for sale, 1 firehouse. The present headquarters of the Bethany Volunteer Firemen's Association will be sold to the highest bidder this Saturday. Erected in 1834, this building served as a center school for exactly 100 years. It was placed at the disposal of the fire department December 1934. It was purchased by the BAA, and as you remember, went up to the Athletic Association field, and then as part of a bicentennial project, came back down and is located up in the north campus, where it resides today.
That building has more miles on it.
Center station got off the ground.
Help me to do a little bit. That's a nice picture.
Of course,
Street's still there.
yeah, tree's still there. With a change in facilities comes a change in facilities.
That Amos car in the back.
The dedication ceremony. That plaque says 1952, but I believe it was November 1st, 1951. And the dedicating committee, O.D. Crooker, Reverend Bryson, Ed Hinman, front row, Chief Lynch, I believe, from New Haven, George Vale, Wallace Sexton. I really don't know the vintage of this photo. It was some sort of a get-together. I wanted to include it because I think that's Ann Brinton. Is that maybe Doc right behind her, Bob?
Looks like. Always after the women.
Well, he had good taste.
True.
Oh, this is a new picture which I just took a couple of days ago, and I wanted to compare the old with the new. If you remember with the old one, there were no trees growing up, and you can see how grown up it has become over the years. This is back to the late 50s. And I think this again is back to dedication day. The memorial stone for departed firemen was added later, but I thought it worthy to add. This is one of the very few pictures of the rear of the building. You see the antenna going in for communications. There is Ed on the left, and I think that might be Ellie on the ladder. I don't know who else it is, Rick.
That was to be filled in behind the head there, and the kitchen is right near where they on the ladder. And every Tuesday night in some fires and so forth, we had coffee, and we tried to fill it up with coffee grounds. And I can remember the coffee grounds at windowsill and height.
This is the disc and air whistle system, which was mounted above the dispatch desk, as I mentioned briefly before. George Howard. And installing the air whistle.
Camp Short was up on the left. The one up there I think was Al Spencer. And then Ed Hinman. And the other one is,
And with the series of blasts, you get a number signal, and by looking at this chart of the town, you would know where to go. And of course, the communications still continue today. Unfortunately, this montage, which hangs on the firehouse wall, shows the old and the new. Advertising on the left, a 1935 dance. The roster of a fireman made by Betsy Seton many years ago, and the Bethany Monopoly game sold by the auxiliary last year. 2 years? Time flies. Unfortunately, also the emergencies continued, and this is the rescue of a young girl over on Litchfield Turnpike by Carl Weston, Richard Fallon, and Fritzy Johnson, rainstorm of 1982. Some of the fires were drills. Some were not.
Red, which one was that? Was that Matson's house?
I think so. That was, Bert Jennings took those pictures.
No, I don't think so. This is Matson's house.
Yeah, Matson's house.
Took place in 72, I think it was. And the house was lost because we were in the middle of a raging blizzard, and we were not able to get sufficient water there. And I can tell you from first-hand experience, it's a very frustrating thing to have to stand there with an empty hose line and watch a house burn down. As a result of fires like this, our capacity for water had to be increased. This was increased through fire ponds, standpipes, increased tankers, and additions to firehouses. This shows the 1978 addition to the center station to hold a rescue truck of dedication day, Herb and Ellie. And this 1974 Diamond Rio 3,000-gallon tanker pumper. These four distinguished gentlemen, Ken Seaton, Red Cunningham, George Quinn, and Ellie Downs, posed for at the purchase of, at the time, number 3, which is an 82 Ford pumper, 1,000-gallon tank, 1,250 gallons per minute. You notice the gallons per minute keeps going up. Also, to carry more water, you may recall this series of pictures in one of the local papers, and it simply said, with this truck, this old donated oil truck, these gentlemen built this tanker. And we acquired 2 of those. I think we may have bought one, and the other one was donated, correct me if I'm wrong. In order to hold this apparatus, and recognizing the need for greater fire service on the west side of town, Hinman Station was built in 1972. At the dedication ceremony, then Chief Russ LaCroix posed with Ed Hinman and Ken Seaton at the dedication of Hinman Station and the Ken Seaton Field. This fire station currently houses our second ambulance on the far right, Engine 81, which is our newest acquisition, which pumps at a phenomenal rate of 2,000 gallons per minute. Compare that with Red's old 35 Ford of 150 gallons per minute, and the 2 tankers on the left. Several years ago, in order to increase our water capacity, standpipes were put in. This one is at Durley's Pond, complete with cow. The reservoirs, of course, are still there. We have the hydrant at Peck Pond. And very recently installed, about a month ago, over at the start of Carriage Drive, a 20,000-gallon cistern with a standpipe. And this process is becoming more and more the case now with the development of with developments going in, largely through the work of Mike Hanley, who's our Water Resources Officer. A few years ago, another addition was added to Hinman Station to house still more tankers and apparatus. At the time this picture was taken, just very recently, we had the rescue truck in one bay, and the old 50 Ford again there, Mac. We need a tune-up on that thing. The muster truck in the far right bay. There's a chief engineer's cage and cabinet over on the far left so we can perform our own maintenance of the vehicles. The center bay is occupied by the Han, which was purchased a couple of years ago from West Haven, totally rebuilt by members of the fire department, most noteworthy of which is Jerry Gervasio, with fire department funds. The latest piece of equipment is affectionately known as Bar B1. We don't put out fires with this one, we start fires in this one. You may have seen this at our Memorial Day shindigs and at our chicken barbecue. Okay. But while the names and faces have changed, and the apparatus is newer and more efficient, the purpose for which the department was formed will never change: the prevention and extinguishment of fires, preservation and protection of life and property, and the promotion of goodwill among its members. Frank, will you get the lights? Frank? So that's the past and the present. What's for the future? Well, we'll continue growing as we have. We'll continue the fundraisers, including tonight. But we want you to know that we have not had a disastrous fire in several years, and that comes from our water resources, our pre-planning, and our outstanding fire leadership, which we are fortunate to have in this department. Now give yourselves all a great big round of applause. You've been a wonderful audience.
Not a lawyer, but what's my papers? I had a few announcements. We're accepting new members tonight, and if you join tonight, your dues are payable right through 1995. And if you renew tonight, you're also paid up right through 1995. And the library is selling calendars, something else. Cookbooks out here.
Use the mic. Thank you.
Is it on?
I turned it off, I'm sorry.
That's good.
Yeah, switch on the bottom.
Is it on?
Stand in front of it.
Stand up.
Try and stand up. We have refreshments. What the that is? Well, the Great Haven Archaeology. Yeah. They're having digs at the
Holy House.
Holy House and Ann Bailey House on Ann Drive. If anyone's interested, to contact Dave Thompson. I think I covered everything.